But I want to actually share with you a criticism and read some of it here. I know this is not a current events segment, but I did want to read. This is actually a review that Matt Walsh commented on himself. It's from New York Magazine, and it says the right's dangerous, just asking questions, anti-trans campaign is working by Malcolm Harris. Uh, this was, I don't know when this was published. Let me see. July of 2022. So July 6th of 2022. That's when it was archived. So I want to read some of this, and I want to see what you think of it. This is from the perspective of somebody left of center. Obviously, this is, I presume, somebody who is in favor of the latest and greatest medical science concerning what they call gender affirming healthcare or gender affirming care.
Mhm.
And they perceive fundamentally any kind of naysaying, any kind of pushback, any kind of counter arguing, and any kind of documentaries of the form that Matt Walsh is generating as inherently just anti-trans. You're just basically bashing trans people, which is already a negatively impacted or marginalized community. And so you're just adding to the marginalization when you do this. So it's, this article is very much framed in that. And this person is attempting to call Matt Walsh out for hiding his horrible, unintelligent Christian views and masquerading as an unbiased person in this documentary. So I want to read some of this, and I want to see if you think the criticisms, at least some of them, are fair. Okay, and it's going to start with this interesting point about language, which I think has problems. But let's read. Over time, words change, stretched by the practicalities of real world usage. Our language warps and evolves. It's an organic, unavoidable, and even auspicious process. But occasionally, we're liable to lose some valuable meaning we can't easily recover. When that happens, it's worth consciously deliberating as a society what we're doing and why, lest the river of language carry us somewhere we don't want to be. The phrase, quote, to beg the question, is a good example. Now, this is actually interesting that he chose this of all the things as the example, because I feel like a better example might have been the shifts of the word meaning of the word woman. I think he's going to go on to touch about it, but his example is begging the question. He's actually going to use this strategically in a way that I actually didn't expect at first. So the phrase, quote, to beg a question is a good example. As it's commonly used today, to beg a question is to suggest it by implication. So to beg a question is to suggest it by implication. It's commonly used today. An empty display case begs the question, who stole the diamond? But the phrase's origin in poor 16th century translation of Aristotle's petitio principi fallacy, what should have been assume the question became beg the question. Today's use may be less complex, but a side effect is that we have a hard time talking about begged questions in the original sense of assertions cloaked in the form of inquiry. Okay. And he means to make this claim about the question, which is the titular question, the titular question, the title of the documentary, what is a woman? That he's saying that's question begging in this negative pejorative sense, which is an assertion cloaked in the form of a question.
Mm.
So Matt Walsh is guilty of asserting a particular kind of understanding. Perhaps we could imagine it as the traditional understanding of what a woman is in the form of a question. New anti-trans documentary, What is a Woman, begs its title question, not in the sense of suggesting it, but in the fallacious way of assuming its own answer. Despite mountains of evidence, the movie's producers and on-screen guide, right-wing pundit Matt Walsh, and I want to emphasize the way that this person is being described, because that's not an accident. Right-wing pundit Matt Walsh do not believe that people can change their gender. So this is, I love the way that's phrased because it makes it seem like people who believe that you can't just change your gender uh, are the ones who are insane. It doesn't say that explicitly, but it rings of that tone, and I just love that. I think that that's delectably ironic. Uh, actually, as Walsh reveals by the end, he doesn't accept the humans' expressed gender at all. He head waves at chromosomes once or twice. he head waves at chromosomes. Those pesky chromosomes. Sorry. The tone of this is just hilarious. He hand waves at chromosomes once or twice, but he leans hardest on common sense. There are boys and girls, men and women, males and females, penises and vaginas. The opening credits feature voiceover recordings from antique sex ed lessons, and they are meant to be authoritative.
Forget trying to figure out women. The real question is, what is a woman?
As you grow, your body changes from that of a young girl to that of a woman. Soon, Molly will be a young woman, having dates, going to dances in lovely romantic dresses.
The boy's shoulders are broad and his body muscular, while the girl's body is more curved.
I'd like to know more about different kinds of hormones.
Presence of these hormones in the blood brings about many changes in the bodies of both boys and girls.
Being a woman is one of the things I like best about myself. I think you'll like it too.
I don't know how fair that is, but it is true that the opening does have as a kind of embellishment, like a montage of like those really, really old sex education films. And I do think they suggest or imply a lot of things. They are doing some subliminal work, to be fair, but that ain't what he relies on for his argument, though. But whatever.
But I do see what he's saying with that, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's some fair. I think there's some fair criticism there. I just think the way that this does it is not the best way.
Yeah.
But by disguising a religious precept as a reasonable question, I'm going to repeat that. By disguising a religious precept as a reasonable question, right? The religious precept being the assumed definition of what a woman is, presumably. Walsh and his team have set out to win new friends and encourage existing allies at the same time. So this is what the evil, no good, very bad Republicans are doing. It's an effective strategy, and the majority of us who understand the factual existence of trans people can't afford to ignore them. So this us versus them, like there's a lot of subtle things being communicated in this that I really want to explore with you. I'm going to read one more paragraph, and then I'm going to open it up before I come back to it, because I want to hear your commentary. Matt Walsh is a Christian, which I think is actually factually correct. And he believes that his God is the source of our shared single nature. He also believes that his God is my God and your God and everyone's God. God exists. God is existence. God is reality. God is permanent, inexhaustible, and God is identity. I don't know where he got that from. I don't know that Christians believe that. Maybe Matt Walsh believes that. I don't even know what that means. But okay. The origin of our own identity is found in God. Well, I guess like God made man in his image, that kind of thing. That's a Christian precept. And so that maybe has some implications, some interesting implications theologically for identity. So maybe something like that is what he means, to steal man in a little bit. I do think that Christians do believe that man comes from God. And so our origin in God has maybe some implications for our identity, where we're identified as these things that come from God or something. We're made in God's image. So maybe that's an important identity marker. It's awkward because it doesn't necessarily imply anything about gender per se, but there's some interesting presuppositions about gender, I think, in those precepts that God is referred to as he, etc. Well, let me finish the paragraph and then I want you to jump in. Sorry. The origin of our own identity is found in God. He writes in 2017, the unholy trinity, blocking the left's assault on life, marriage, and gender. So Matt Walsh wrote this. In transgenderism, as he calls it, always in scare quotes, man achieves his final victory over truth, and truth's God. So this is like, I guess, raking Matt Walsh over the coals for his Christian views. But his Christian views were nowhere in the documentary, which is interesting to me. But he's like, the whole point of this is Matt Walsh is secretly a conservative, but he's pretending to be objective in his pursuit in this documentary, but he has a secret hidden Christian proselytism agenda. Is kind of is implied here, if not stated outright. Let me stop there because I hear what you have to say. What do you think about the scathing review so far? We just got into the intro.
Okay, so the whole that was very marking, like waving at chromosomes.
He just kind of did a Trump. He just kind of no chromosomes, no fake news chromosomes. They're not respecting
That's
the
so funny
chromosomes.
because they're usually the ones that hand wave chromosomes, like saying that it's actually irrelevant to the question completely. So I don't understand what the critique is of what's it called, of Matt Walsh. If he does mention them as something relevant, that's something that they usually mention as something irrelevant to gender identity, right? Am I getting that wrong?
I think
So
you're
isn't
basically
that
right. Let me try to do my work here, and I want to be sincere. Although I was kind of being tongue in cheek before, I'm going to try to steelman this. I think there's a way to steelman this. So I think that a core contention of those who are left to center, who sincerely affirm or uphold this gender ideology, is that there's something inherently oppressive about the idea that one's biology, and particularly one's the presence or lack thereof of specific gonads, the presence of a penis, the presence of a vagina, that determines your gender. Is there something inherently oppressive about it? Because what it does is it boxes up people in ways that they ought not be boxed up. That the whole contention is that gender identity is more fluid than this kind of binary categorization system. And it is the binary categorization system that itself foists a whole bunch of social expectations and pressures on people that they don't find naturally or that they're not naturally inclined towards. That's a core contention there. And so to steelman the position a bit, I think hand waving at chromosomes is supposed to imply this reference to what people left to center call biological determinism, which is inherently oppressive in their view for the reasons that I just tried to articulate. And so hand waving at chromosomes, basically affirming the idea that your chromosomes determine your gender, is a problem. It is to affirm a particular kind of bias that negatively impacts trans and non-binary people who exist. People for whom fitting into these nice binary categories is something that is not only extremely difficult, but is intrusive and unnatural for them. And we ought to be accommodating to them because it is intrusive and unnatural to them, indeed oppressive for those reasons. I think that's the best way to steelman it, or at least describe or articulate the view with fidelity. And I think that instead of saying all of that and explaining all of that, this person assumes an audience that already understands that. And so the hand waving at chromosomes is a quick way to kind of gesture at that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can see how that could have been what they meant.